The tension reached its peak when the courtroom fell silent and the damning text messages were read aloud. The mother's calculated plan to sabotage the protagonist's life unraveled, exposing lies, betrayal, and conspiracy. As the jury delivered their verdict, justice was served and a family's dark secrets were laid bare. But the real heart of this story lies in how one father and his daughter overcame unimaginable betrayal to rebuild their lives stronger than ever. But before diving deeper into this gripping tale, let me know where you're watching this from in the comments below. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. The protagonist, a 30-year-old American man, leads a stable and modest life, working diligently at his office job. Recently, he celebrated his engagement to a woman he believed was his soulmate, a beacon of hope for a brighter future. Despite his grounded lifestyle, he occasionally faces subtle judgment from her opinionated family, who seem to view his modest income as a flaw rather than a virtue. The engagement celebration was a heartfelt event, a backyard barbecue surrounded by close friends and family. The evening brimmed with laughter, yet lingering under the surface were subtle remarks from her family about his financial status, hinting at potential conflicts ahead. However, the protagonist remained optimistic, focusing on the joy of their new chapter together. Central to his life is his 6-year-old daughter Lily from a previous relationship. A bright and curious child, Lily is his pride and joy, and he has full custody of her. From the beginning, his fiancée appeared to embrace Lily warmly, forming a bond that solidified his trust in their relationship. For him, the connection between his fiancée and Lily was a reassuring sign of a harmonious future, one that would soon be tested in unimaginable ways. It was a quiet Sunday morning when the protagonist's fiancée abruptly confronted him, her voice trembling with anger. In her hand were grainy, poorly lit photos of him walking out of a restaurant with another woman. The images, taken from a distance, captured him laughing and chatting with his coworker after a professional meeting earlier that week. "Care to explain this?" she demanded, thrusting the photos at him. Her tone was cold, her eyes sharp with accusation. Startled, he quickly explained the situation. The woman in the photos was a colleague from his office, a marketing strategist he'd met to discuss an upcoming project over lunch. He even offered to show her emails and calendar entries proving the meeting's purpose. But his fiancée refused to hear him out. "Do you think I'm stupid?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You think you can fool me with your innocent act?" Despite his calm explanations, her anger only intensified. She accused him of lying, of betraying her trust, and of leading a double life. The words stung, especially because they echoed the judgmental remarks her family had made about him in the past. "My mother was right about you," she hissed, her voice laced with venom. "You're just a low-class fraud, pretending to be a good guy." Her refusal to believe him left him reeling. He showed her the coworker's contact information, even suggesting she call to verify his story, but she refused. "You think she'd tell me the truth?" she shot back, her words dripping with sarcasm. The confrontation spiraled into a shouting match, her accusations growing more heated with every passing moment. The protagonist couldn't help but feel the weight of her family's previous criticisms bearing down on him. They had always been skeptical of him, subtly questioning his intentions and financial stability. Now, it seemed those seeds of doubt had blossomed into full-blown mistrust, fueled by these misleading photos. No matter how much evidence he presented, her mind was made up. What hurt most wasn't just the baseless accusations, but the venom in her words. The fiancé he once thought was kind and loving now seemed like a stranger, her warmth replaced by icy hostility. It was clear that her doubts about him had been festering for a while, waiting for an excuse to surface. Exhausted and heartbroken, he asked her to take a step back and think about what she was saying. "Why would I risk everything we've built together over something so trivial?" he pleaded. But his words fell on deaf ears. Her trust in him had already been shattered, not by his actions, but by her own insecurities and the toxic influence of her family. The confrontation ended with her storming out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The protagonist sat in stunned silence, grappling with the realization that the foundation of their relationship had been far weaker than he'd believed. The accusations marked the beginning of a harrowing journey that would test his resilience, integrity, and most importantly, his love for his daughter. The argument that had erupted between the protagonist and his fiancée was loud enough to reach the ears of his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, From her room, she listened to the raised voices and felt the tension that filled the house. Curious and concerned, Lily cautiously approached the living room, her small figure peeking out from behind the corner. Her wide, innocent eyes reflected the confusion she felt as she heard her soon-to-be stepmother's angry words. When there was a pause in the argument, Lily stepped forward hesitantly. "Daddy?" she asked in a small voice, drawing the attention of both adults. "Why is she so mad? Did you do something wrong?" Her question was laced with fear, as if the conflict threatened the safe world her father had always provided for her. The protagonist immediately softened, kneeling to Lily's eye level. "Sweetheart, it's just a grown-up misunderstanding," he said gently, pulling her into a reassuring hug. "You didn't do anything wrong and everything's going to be okay." His fiancée stood in silence for a moment, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving Lily even more confused. The atmosphere in the house felt heavy for the rest of the evening, but the worst was yet to come. A few hours later, there was an aggressive knock on the front door. Before the protagonist could answer, the door burst open and his fiancée's father and brothers stormed in, their faces twisted with rage. "How dare you humiliate my daughter," her father bellowed, pointing a finger at him. The protagonist barely had time to process what was happening before one of the brothers shoved him hard against the wall. "We trusted you, and you cheated on her? You're nothing but a lying piece of trash," another brother snarled, throwing a punch that landed squarely on the protagonist's jaw. Lily, who had been sitting in the living room playing with her toys, screamed in terror at the sudden violence. "Daddy!" she cried, tears streaming down her face as she ran to her room and locked the door. The assault continued as the protagonist tried to shield himself, pleading with them to stop. "Please, not in front of my daughter," he shouted, his voice desperate, but his words fell on deaf ears. They pushed him to the ground, kicking him while hurling accusations and insults. When the attack finally ended, the men left, warning him to stay away from their family. Bloodied and bruised, the protagonist struggled to his feet, his body aching from the beating. His first thought was of Lily. He stumbled to her room and knocked gently on the door. "Lily, it's me," he said softly, his voice trembling. "It's okay now, they're gone." After a moment, the door creaked open, and Lily's tear-streaked face appeared. Her eyes widened in horror when she saw the blood on his face and the bruises forming on his arms. "Daddy, are you hurt?" she asked, her voice quivering. "I'm okay, sweetheart," he reassured her, pulling her into a gentle hug despite the pain. "It's over now, and you're safe. That's all that matters." The next morning, his fiancée returned, but not with an apology or any attempt to reconcile. Instead, she stood in the doorway, her expression cold and distant. "This isn't going to work," she said bluntly. "We're done. Don't come near me or my family again." The protagonist looked at her, his heart heavy with disappointment and sadness. He had once thought she was the woman he'd spend the rest of his life with, the one who would help him build a loving family for Lily. But now he saw someone who had let mistrust and her family's toxicity destroy everything they'd built. As she turned to leave, Lily appeared behind him, clutching his hand. "Is she leaving, Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice trembling with tears. He knelt down and looked into Lily's tearful eyes, his own heart breaking for her. "Yes, sweetheart," he said softly. "She won't be coming back." "Why not?" Lily asked, struggling to understand. "I thought she loved us." The protagonist took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Sometimes people make mistakes and hurt others," he explained gently. "It's not your fault and it's not because she doesn't care about you. But we need to focus on us now, okay? You and me, like always." Lily nodded slowly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Just us," she repeated, her small voice resolute. As his fiancée walked out of their lives, the protagonist felt a mixture of pain and relief. He had lost someone he thought he could trust, but in doing so, he realized how much he still had in Lily. She was his strength, his purpose, and the one unwavering source of love in his life. Despite the hurt, he vowed to rebuild their lives together, stronger than ever. The morning after the assault, bruised and sore, the protagonist stared at himself in the bathroom mirror. His face bore the evidence of the attack, purple and blue bruises, a cut on his lip and a swelling around his cheekbone. Every muscle ached, but it wasn't the physical pain that weighed on him most. It was the memory of Lily's terrified cries as the violence unfolded. He knew he couldn't let it slide, not just for himself, but for her. Encouraged by a close friend who happened to be a lawyer, he decided to file a police report. He arrived at the station with photographs of his injuries taken the night before, along with a detailed account of the incident. The officers were appalled by the unprovoked attack and took his statement seriously. They assured him that an investigation would be launched, and they documented his injuries as evidence. As he signed the report, he felt a small sense of relief. Justice, at least, was beginning to take its course. Back at home, the toll of the events became evident in Lily. She was no longer her bright, bubbly self. Instead, she became quiet and withdrawn, clinging to her father whenever he was near. She avoided her toys and spent hours curled up on the couch, staring silently at the television. The sparkle in her eyes, which he loved so dearly, seemed dimmed by fear and confusion. One evening, as they sat together in her bedroom, Lily finally spoke about what had happened. "Daddy," she said hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did they hurt you? I thought they liked us." His heart broke at her words, but he kept his voice steady, determined to provide her with reassurance. "Sweetheart, sometimes people make bad choices," he explained, holding her close. "What they did was wrong, and that's why I told the police. It's not your job to worry about it, okay? I'm going to make sure we're safe, and I'll always protect you." "But what if they come back?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. "They won't," he said firmly. "I promise. The police are helping us, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." Over the following days, he made a conscious effort to create a sense of normalcy for Lily. He took her on walks to the park, played her favorite games, and read extra bedtime stories. Slowly, she began to open up again, though traces of her anxiety lingered. Every now and then, she would ask if they were truly safe, and each time he would reassure her with the same promise, "I've got you, Lily. No one's going to hurt us." The ordeal had shaken them both, but the protagonist knew that as long as they faced it together, they could overcome anything. His love for Lily and his determination to provide her with a secure and happy life became the driving force behind his actions moving forward. Weeks after filing the police report, the protagonist received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end introduced himself as a distant relative of his ex-fiancée, a cousin who had always felt out of place in her family's dynamics. "I know about what happened," the cousin said hesitantly, "and I think you deserve to know the truth. Can we meet?" Curious but cautious, the protagonist agreed to meet him at a small diner in town. Sitting across the table, the cousin looked uneasy, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid someone might overhear. "I didn't want to get involved," he began, his voice low. "But what they did to you, it's not right, and I have proof." The cousin revealed a shocking truth. The protagonist's ex-fiancée had not acted alone. Her mother had orchestrated the entire scheme. Disapproving of the relationship from the start, she had hired someone to take ambiguous photos of the protagonist and spread rumors of infidelity to sabotage the engagement. The photos, along with subtle manipulations and planted doubts, had been enough to push her daughter over the edge. "She's always been controlling," the cousin admitted. She couldn't stand the idea of her daughter marrying someone she thought wasn't good enough. To prove his claims, the cousin slid a USB drive across the table. "This has everything," he explained. "Messages between her and the guy she hired. They talk about the photos, the rumors, everything. You didn't do anything wrong. She just wanted you out of the picture." The protagonist stared at the drive in disbelief, anger and vindication mixing within him. He thanked the cousin sincerely, appreciating the risk he had taken to come forward. That evening, the protagonist reviewed the messages on the USB drive. They were damning. The conversations detailed every step of the mother's plan, from hiring the photographer to encouraging her daughter to end the relationship. The mother's disdain for him was clear, with messages describing him as unworthy and a burden. It was painful to read, but it also provided undeniable proof of his innocence. The next day, he contacted his lawyer and shared the evidence. His lawyer was stunned by the extent of the conspiracy. "This changes everything," the lawyer said, their tone serious. "We need to turn this over to the police immediately." At the police station, the detectives who had been handling his assault case were equally shocked. They hadn't anticipated the situation to be so deeply rooted in manipulation and conspiracy. The messages on the USB drive provided the foundation for a new case, one that went beyond assault and into the territory of criminal conspiracy. The police began preparing charges against his ex-fiancee's mother, including conspiracy and defamation. The revelation shifted the narrative entirely. What had initially appeared to be a tragic misunderstanding fueled by anger was now exposed as a premeditated scheme with malicious intent. Though the road ahead was still long, the protagonist felt a renewed sense of strength. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, the chance to restore his and Lily's peace of mind. For the first time since the ordeal began, he felt like justice was within reach. In the days following the police's announcement of the new charges, the protagonist began receiving unexpected calls. One evening, his phone buzzed, and to his surprise, it was his ex-fiancee's father. The older man's voice, usually gruff and authoritative, was softer now, almost pleading. "Look, I'm sorry for what happened," he began, awkwardly stumbling over his words. "Things got out of hand. Can't we just put this all behind us? We're family. Oh, we were going to be." The protagonist remained calm, though his frustration simmered beneath the surface. "With all due respect," he replied, "your family attacked me in my own home. They terrified my daughter, and the evidence shows this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was planned. I can't ignore that." Despite his firm stance, the calls didn't stop. His ex-fiancée began sending tearful messages, alternating between apologies and attempts to justify her actions. "I didn't know what my mother was doing," one message read. "She manipulated me and I was stupid enough to believe her lies. Please, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Another message was more desperate. "We were so happy, weren't we? Can't we just go back to the way things were? I'll do anything to fix this." But her words rang hollow. The protagonist knew that trust, once broken so thoroughly, couldn't be repaired with apologies alone. One evening, as he was responding to another text, Lily overheard part of the conversation. "Is she coming back?" she asked hesitantly, her big, questioning eyes searching his face. He sighed, kneeling to her level. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "She made some choices that hurt us, and when someone breaks your trust like that, it's hard to fix things. It's not your fault, okay? We're going to be just fine. Just the two of us." Lily nodded slowly, though he could see the sadness lingering in her expression. He hugged her tightly, silently vowing that he wouldn't let anyone else disrupt their lives again. The next day, another relative from his ex-fiancee's family approached him, a cousin who had been outspoken during the engagement party. This time, the tone was less apologetic and more transactional. "We've talked about this as a family," the cousin said, sliding a check across the table during their meeting at a cafe. "If you drop the charges and let this blow over, we'll cover your medical bills and throw in a little extra for the trouble." The protagonist pushed the check back without even glancing at it. "This isn't about money," he said firmly. "It's about accountability. What they did wasn't just a mistake, it was deliberate. Justice needs to be served." The cousin's expression turned sour. "You're being unreasonable," they muttered. But the protagonist stood his ground, refusing to be swayed. Though the pressure from the family continued, the protagonist's resolve remained unshaken. He knew that accepting their offers would send the wrong message, not just to them, but to Lily. He wanted to show her that standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, is always the right choice. As time passed, Lily's natural curiosity began to surface. The events that had disrupted their lives still weighed heavily on her, but instead of retreating into fear, she started asking questions. One evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table coloring, Lily looked up and asked, "Daddy, why did they hurt you? You didn't do anything wrong." Her question was simple yet profound, and it gave the protagonist an opportunity to address the situation in a way that a 6-year-old could understand. "Sometimes, people do things because they believe what they're doing is right, even when it's not," he explained gently. "What happened wasn't fair, and that's why we have rules and laws, to help make things right when someone gets hurt." Lily thought for a moment, then asked, "So that's why you talked to the police? To make it fair?" "Exactly," he said, nodding. "When something bad happens, you have to stand up for yourself. It's not always easy, but telling the truth and standing up for what's right is how we make things better, not just for us, but for others too. Like superheroes? She asked, her eyes lighting up a little. Kind of like superheroes, he replied with a smile. Except instead of superpowers, we use courage and honesty. Their conversations became a regular part of their evenings, with Lily asking more questions about fairness, truth, and justice. These moments became a source of growth for both of them, Lily learning the importance of self-respect, and the protagonist finding a renewed sense of purpose in guiding her through life's complexities. Meanwhile, the legal process was moving forward. The evidence gathered by the police, including the USB drive with the intercepted messages, had built a strong case against his ex-fiancée's family. After weeks of preparation, charges were finally filed. Her father and brothers faced charges of aggravated assault for their violent attack. The photographs of the protagonist's injuries and the testimony from the cousin who had come forward painted a damning picture of their actions. The charges carried serious potential penalties, given the premeditated nature of the assault. The most significant revelation, however, was the role of the ex-fiancée's mother. The messages she had exchanged with her hired accomplice left no doubt about her involvement in orchestrating the conspiracy. Her plan to sabotage the engagement and her explicit disdain for the protagonist were laid bare in the texts. The police charged her with conspiracy and defamation, crimes that carried severe legal consequences. When the news of the charges broke, it sent shockwaves through the small community where the family was well known. The protagonist, however, remained focused on protecting Lily and ensuring she was shielded from the fallout. Though the process was emotionally draining, he felt a sense of validation knowing that justice was being pursued. Through it all, Lily's strength and curiosity continued to inspire him. Watching her learn to navigate the complex ideas of fairness and integrity reminded him of why he had fought so hard to stand his ground. Together, they began to rebuild their lives, fortified by the knowledge that standing up for the truth, no matter how difficult, was always the right choice. The courtroom was tense as the trial began, filled with a mix of anticipation and unease. The protagonist sat in the witness stand, his nerves steady but his mind replaying the events he was about to recount. The prosecution wasted no time in laying out the case, beginning with his testimony. Under oath, he detailed the night of the assault. His voice was calm, but the weight of the memory lingered in every word. He described the confrontation in vivid detail, the moment his fiancée's father and brothers burst into his home, their angry accusations, the physical blows, and the fear in Lily's eyes as she hid in her room. He spoke of the aftermath, the bruises, the fear, and the impact on his daughter's sense of safety. The jury listened intently, their expressions somber as they absorbed the gravity of his account. The prosecutor then introduced the physical evidence, photos of his injuries taken immediately after the assault, medical reports confirming the extent of the damage, and the police report documenting the violent incident. Next, they moved to the conspiracy, presenting the messages recovered from the USB drive. The text exchanges between the ex-fiancée's mother and her accomplice were damning. The prosecution read aloud excerpts where the mother explicitly discussed her plans to sabotage the engagement. Phrases like, "I need you to make it look bad," and "this will prove he's not good enough," painted a clear picture of her malicious intent. The most pivotal moment came when the cousin, the one who had brought the evidence forward, took the stand. He testified about the family's history of manipulation and control, describing how the mother had always dictated her daughter's relationships. His testimony tied the conspiracy together, leaving little room for doubt about the family's premeditated actions. The defense, in contrast, sought to portray the events in a different light. They argued that the assault had been a misunderstanding, an overreaction fueled by familial love and concern for their daughter. They attempted to frame the father and brothers as protective figures who acted impulsively in defense of the fiancée's honor. When it came to the conspiracy, the defense leaned heavily on emotional appeals, claiming the mother's actions were those of a parent misguided by fear and a desire to protect her child. They painted her as overzealous, not malicious, hoping to elicit sympathy from the jury. But the prosecution was quick to dismantle these arguments. They highlighted the message's cold, calculated tone, pointing out that the conspiracy wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a deliberate scheme spanning weeks. The detailed timeline of events, combined with the undeniable evidence of premeditation, left the defense's narrative in shambles. After days of testimony, cross-examinations, and closing arguments, the case went to the jury. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. The father and brothers were found guilty of aggravated assault. The jury had been moved by the evidence of their violence and the impact it had on the protagonist and his daughter. The premeditated nature of their actions, coupled with the severity of the assault, left no room for leniency. The mother faced her own reckoning. The jury found her guilty of conspiracy, her messages and orchestrated plan too incriminating to ignore. Her involvement in hiring someone to fabricate evidence and manipulate her daughter sealed her fate. Sentencing followed shortly after. The father and brothers were each handed prison sentences for their roles in the assault. The lengths varied, but they were significant enough to send a clear message about the consequences of their actions. The mother, meanwhile, faced steep legal consequences for her role in the conspiracy. Though she avoided prison due to her age and lack of prior offenses, her sentence included heavy fines, mandatory community service, and probation. Her reputation was irreparably damaged, and her social standing within the community crumbled. For the protagonist, the verdict and sentencing brought a sense of closure. Justice had been served, not just for him but for Lily, who had been caught in the crossfire of their malicious actions. The process had been exhausting, but the outcome validated his decision to stand his ground and fight for the truth. As he left the courtroom that day, he took Lily's hand and looked down at her. "It's over now," he said softly. "We can finally move on." Lily nodded, her small face showing a mix of relief and understanding. She didn't fully grasp the complexities of what had happened, but she knew that her father had fought to protect her, and that was enough. Together, they walked out into the sunlight, ready to rebuild their lives free from the shadow of betrayal and harm. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with justice on their side, they faced it with newfound strength and hope. Even after the trial concluded and justice had been served, the protagonist's ex-fiancée continued to reach out. Her messages alternated between desperate apologies and tearful attempts at reconciliation. "I didn't know what my mother was doing," she insisted in one message. "I was manipulated. I was wrong. Please, just give me another chance." At first, he ignored her, focusing on Lily and their healing process. But when her persistence escalated into repeated calls and surprise visits to his workplace, he decided it was time to address the situation directly. He arranged to meet her in a public place, bringing along a trusted friend as a witness for support. Sitting across from her at a cafe, he listened as she once again tried to explain her actions, blaming her mother for everything that had happened. "I was scared and confused," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I love you. I always have." He remained calm but resolute. "Love isn't just about feelings. It's about trust and respect," he said firmly. "You believed lies about me. You let your family's opinions and manipulations destroy what we had. That's not love. And without trust, there's nothing to rebuild." Before she could respond, Lily, who had accompanied him, stepped forward. Standing beside her father, she looked directly at the woman who had once promised to be her stepmother. "We don't need someone who doesn't believe in us," Lily said with quiet strength, her small voice carrying a surprising weight. Her words left the ex-fiancé speechless, and the conversation ended soon after. As they left the cafe, the protagonist felt a profound sense of closure. He had chosen self-respect over reconciliation, setting an example for Lily about the importance of standing firm in one's values. With the legal battles behind them, the protagonist turned his focus to rebuilding their lives. He dedicated himself to creating a stable and nurturing environment for Lily, ensuring that the trauma of the past wouldn't define their future. He enrolled her in new activities, from art classes to weekend hikes, helping her regain her confidence and rediscover her sense of joy. Lily's resilience amazed him. Though she had been deeply affected by the ordeal, her strength shone through as she began to embrace life with renewed enthusiasm. She often expressed pride in her father, saying, "You stood up for us, Daddy. That makes you a hero." Her words inspired him to reflect on his journey. The support he had received from his lawyer, his friends, and even the relative who had exposed the truth had been instrumental in helping him navigate the most challenging period of his life. He felt a deep gratitude for their roles in achieving justice and closure. Moving forward, he vowed to approach relationships with caution and clarity, prioritizing trust and respect above all else. He knew now that true love couldn't exist without those foundations, and he refused to settle for anything less. As for Lily, her strength and maturity continued to inspire him every day. Together, they embraced their new chapter with hope, determined to build a future filled with love, trust, and resilience. What they had endured was painful, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond between father and daughter, a bond that would guide them through anything life had to offer.